We'd now like to go ahead with our speaker for today. We have Michael Dinsio. He's an MBA. He's the founder of Next Level Consultants. We're excited to have him. I think this can be valuable to whatever stage of practice we're in. So go ahead, Michael.
It's good to take the mute off when you're the keynote tonight. So that's a good start. So thank you, Dr. Brady, and thanks the entire society for bringing me on tonight. Sandra, appreciate you asking, and I was grateful to accept. My name's Mike Dinsio. I'm the founder of Next Level Consultants. We are a full service dental consulting firm. We're in 14 states today. I think we have about 35 clients, all in different stages of life. Let's just put it that way. And I would say that the majority of what we help doctors do is we help them transition, whether it's on the front end or the back end. And tonight we're going to focus on really both sides of the spectrum. You know, when Sandra challenged me with some good topics on transitions, we didn't want to leave out the buyers. And although the liquidity event is really for the sellers and speaking directly to the sellers, buyers pay attention because when we help doctors buy practices, the same things that I'm going to be challenging the sellers for tonight is the same things that you all need to be looking at when you buy a practice. And so I really welcome questions. You guys can listen to me talk all night, and that'll be great. I'll bring my energy. I'm feeling a little sick today, so you guys don't have to worry about me spreading COVID to you through the screen. But I was a little disappointed that we had to cancel the in-person. I love speaking in person, and I miss all your faces. For those of you that know me, I used to be with Bank of America. Matt here, I guess I was of the Bank of America school. Some of his faces in Snohomish County did a lot of bank loans with you. I transitioned out of banking, really fell in love with the business of dentistry, got into consulting, hired a phenomenal team that helps me coach all of our clients. And as far as our team, we've got a clinical coach, a front office coach, and then of course myself as the business and marketing coach. So please ask away. I don't have my partners on with me tonight, but I'm sure I can answer some questions. And but let's get this party started. So the liquidity event. Why did I call it that way? I called it the liquidity event because it is the major event for you to sell that practice and get the money out of this business that you've been managing and owning for many years. Blood, sweat, and tears went into this. And your time has come, and that could be very, very hard for a lot of you trying to think about what you're doing after the life of being a dentist. And you're always going to be a dentist, but you might not own a practice. And so my goal tonight is really to prepare you for this major event and challenge you to think of it a little bit more strategic. And what I mean by that is, you all know Michael Jordan. Michael Jordan, I call it the Michael Jordan effect when you're selling a practice. So Michael Jordan, as you all know, was a phenomenal basketball player, just crushed every category when it comes to being a basketball player, defense, offense, you name it, scoring records. We all know that he won 3 national championships, retired, took a little sabbatical to the baseball thing, and that was kind of interesting. But then he jumped back into the league, won 3 more championships, and then retired again. So I call it the Michael Jordan effect because you really do want to sell while you're on top if you're trying to maximize this event. If you sold your practice today, you still could be a dentist if you still have that energy. But if we're really trying to think about the business as an asset that you get to sell, there's no one that could influence the growth of your practice than someone that's been in the practice for a long time and has the goodwill of all the patients, the staff, has your back in all ways. And so there's no one that can do that better than you. So think of it as a business and take the opportunity to really maximize what I would say is one of your greatest investments of your life. We can all put money in stocks and hope that it grows and sell it at the top. Why not do that with your practice? So, but before we get into kind of like the meat and potatoes of it, let me first just kind of get into some of this fluffy stuff, but stuff that really, really matters. So I can't overemphasize your team, and that goes for buyers and sellers. Your team is everything, and we've got some phenomenal speakers, and I can vouch for sponsors. I can vouch for all three of those companies and gentlemen. They do phenomenal work, and they are part of your team as you go into either buying or selling a practice. And so, really important. You guys and gals have never done this before. Some of you may have sold your practice and bought, but in this case, this might be a first time, most of you. And your financial advisor, especially if you're selling a practice, you got to have a plan, and we'll get into that. Accountant Kevin and his dad. I mean, I've been doing business with Kevin and Brian for 10 years. Quality firm, and can help you with a lot of this stuff. Of course, practice brokers. We'll talk about that. I represent a lot of buyers on that side and represent them, but I am not a practice broker, but I've been trained in valuation, and we can talk about some of that tonight. But having somebody walk you through the process is really, really important, because again, the lack of experience that you have in that can be very challenging. Enough said. Attorney, both sides need a great attorney that's got your back as your greatest fiduciary, and will try to keep you out of court post close. And there's nothing more nasty. And I've been depositions. I've been represents clients that have had to take folks to court afterwards. And so it's not good for anybody. Let me promise you that. And so you got to have a good attorney that's going to advise you along the process. And then for selfish reasons, I threw in consultant, because consultants can be amazing partners to you in the growth of your practice, and just really taking that next step into retirement. And for a buyer, taking on a new practice is very, very challenging. You've never been an owner before. Your clinical skills might be dialed in, but you've never had to deal with a hygienist coming up to you saying, "I deserve a raise." You've never had to manage P&L and figure out how to cut costs. You've never had to deal with some of these managerial issues, and it's a whole nother ball game. And you all know that. So surround yourself by some of the best people, because you'll get through it easier, and it'll just be better. Okay, so the mentality of the buyer. So for those of you in the buyer world, in the audience, so you should probably relate to a lot of these bullet points. But for the sellers in the room, I want to go through this, because it's very important for you all to get into the head of a buyer, because if you don't understand who's across the table from you, then you're going to have a harder time with this process. I promise. Buyers, same thing. If you don't understand the seller's perspective on the other side, you're going to have a hard time. So this slide is really just tapping into the buyer mentality for you sellers, just to get a feel for what's today's dentists thinking that are interested in ownership. And again, this isn't Pacific Northwest specific. We've got, like I said, we got clients in 14 states. So this is really a diagnosis, so to speak, of all buyers that are interested in getting into ownership. So optimistic about the future of dentistry. So a lot of the folks that are in the room, the virtual room tonight, you guys and ladies are tired. You're tired of owning. You're thinking about selling. You don't know. Maybe it's 1 year, 3 years, 5 years, but you're tired. You're going to be reading the articles about how the DSOs are taking over the world, and you're going to be reading articles about how Delta Dental is giving you issues and this, that, and the other. The buyers are very optimistic, and they want ownership, and that makes me happy, because we don't want it to get all cannibalized into one big group. And I'm pro private practice, which is one of my greatest passions in serving this community is helping you all be the best business owners you possibly can be. That's what drives me. It's what gets me out of bed. So that is today's dentist that's seeking ownership. They are sick of associating. The lack of autonomy, full autonomy, is the common theme there. They just can't do what they want to do. They're working for a DSO, and it's just churn and burn, and not preventative focused, very reactive, and just we know what that looks like, and they're sick of it. So a lot of them moonlight between 1 to 2 offices, and they are getting full time between 4 to 5, but a lot of them moonlight. The average makes probably somewhere between 120, and the high earners are at 160. So walking into the transition process, the buyers want some guarantees in this transition, but are absolutely willing to take the risk. And I can promise you that. Now, what can you guarantee? Well, we'll kind of get into some of those things, and please ask questions as I spark some thoughts that you have tonight. I really want to address those by the end of the night. Just like all of you, they want to feel like they're getting something. They want to feel like it's a win-win. They want a bargain, but they also understand that there's a lack of inventory out there, and we can kind of get into that. Back to that Michael Jordan effect. Selling at the top is the best time to sell, right? And so there is a lack of inventory right now, which is why our startup business of coaching doctors is skyrocketed in the last 6 months. It's just absolutely skyrocketed. Dustin talked about that tonight. Matt obviously is working on a lot of startups, and the reason they're starting up is because you all haven't sold or putting your practice up for sale. So the lack of inventory is driving prices up. So that's a good thing for you here in the Northwest. They are very concerned about hiring and staffing issues, and rightfully so, right? Because you all are fighting that today. I'm personally fighting that. I've been looking for an assistant for 3-4 months now. People aren't even showing up for interviews. It's absolutely insane right now. The hygiene scarcity, at one time the dental assistant still scarcity, even front office, qualified front office people. And so we are under attack right now, and they know it, and you know it, and that is probably one of the biggest concerns in a transition. I will say COVID itself is not as much as a factor. And you have to understand, I did 40 transitions in 2020 during COVID. That was top of mind on almost every single conversation is, what's this mean? Are patients going to show? What are the protocols? Let's call Dustin Long and put up dividers because I need everything to be sectioned off. Like, it was just the extreme of extremes. And we all went through that. Of course, staffing was an issue with the guarantees that they had and the protections they had, and then the vaccines. And I'm not saying something you folks don't know. This is a real thing. But buying a practice and knowing that your patients are going to come in for their cleanings is not as much of a scare as it was right out of COVID with the vaccines and whatnot. So I'm just saying, in general, there's that less of the fear that the business is going to crash. Okay, that's what I mean by that. Of course, the external things and factors that COVID has brought us are definitely concerns. Hence the team and staff challenges. More things on the buyer. So they rely heavily on professionals, me included, Brian and Kevin and Matt and attorneys. Relies very heavy on the professionals. So as you walk into these transitions, understand that the buyer is going to be greatly influenced by smart people that have done many transitions. So just know that the little to no business acumen, that's a true statement. You guys don't get trained in business. I've got an MBA, spent years understanding business and then practiced it in my entire life and career. And it's led me to being a consultant. You all didn't get that training. And so of course you don't have any. But the next bullet point is interesting because they are very interested in learning the business of dentistry, very interested. And so it's a different business person minded aura or feeling that I get from today's buyers. Definitely different than, call it, a decade ago when I sat in Matt's chair, doctors were not as excited about learning the business of dentistry. Today, I think they have to, right? If they are going to compete against the quote unquote DSOs, and they have to be savvy business people, but they don't have that training, but they're interested in it. This next one might be a shocker to you. Probably on average about 50 or less thousand in the bank liquidity, and Matt can probably shake his head to that. And again, depending on how long they've been out, they have the opportunity to save more. But I only say that because anything less than what, like 70, 100,000 is not a lot when you're seeking a business loan. And that's probably what some of you are thinking. We can address some of that too. I will stress that they get a lot of their information online. When you all started your practice, you didn't have podcasts, you didn't have Facebook groups, that's for sure. In Dentaltown, Howard Fran did not exist. You did have fellow colleagues, but notice the order of operations there: Facebook, Dentaltown, podcast. I would say, of the buyers in the room, you're probably shaking your head. Yeah, I mean, they research everything. And with that research is dangerous. And for buyers, I'll speak to you directly, is just because you're reading something online doesn't mean that that person giving you advice understands your situation, doesn't understand the practice you're trying to buy, doesn't understand the market, doesn't understand your financial situation. It's all different. And imagine being on a Facebook group and getting some advice from someone that lives in New York City. It's a totally different philosophy than buying a practice in Washington. Wages are different, business models different, marketing ideas are different, rental rates are different. I mean, I could just keep going on, but yet I would say that the doctors are very interested in business, like I just mentioned. And so they're just trying to get as much information as they can. And so I would say, be careful, folks, about the information, even online, that you get, because your situation and that advice just may not fit. Sellers understand they're getting a lot of information from 100 different people. So they do rely on their professionals, but they're also getting outside information. And so it's a very confusing and scary time. If you can imagine buying a practice in this environment, it can be very, very nerve-wracking. We're getting to the end here. More often than not, and this is interesting, I'm not saying I agree with it. I'm just simply saying more often than not, these buyers they have the idea or the vision to own multiple practices. And we can debate about that, and that can be a different lecture for a different day, if that makes sense or not. But just walking into it, again, they're very interested in the business of dentistry. And if you're interested in the business of dentistry, then you're thinking, well, I think I can handle 2 practices. But they don't have the stress factor of the first practice yet. But I'm just saying that they're interested in multiple practices if they can get their hands around it. And the last piece that I'll mention on, and really talks about some of the stuff that Dustin talked about, is doing that little refresh. I mean, not so much in the construction world, but just in general, they want to focus on technology, and they want to implement the things that they learned in school. And that goes along with pleasing aesthetics of the practice and getting decent technologies. You know, they don't even know how to present a case without some of this technology. And so if you're still on films, say, that could be a challenge. And I think that's obvious. If your computer system's running slow and it can't even download Dexis or something, like, that could be a problem, right? And so just understand that today's buyer, that's standard of care to them. And so so I hope you have some questions about that tonight. Okay, getting to the thick of it. So value. I'm sure all of you are thinking value. Buyers are all thinking value. I could probably spend the entire night tonight talking about value because it's what everybody wants to know. But I'm going to really irritate you right now with this comment, and it is simply, do not use the rule of thumb. It's a rule of thumb. If you all are thinking percentage of top line, it's not an accurate valuation. It's just not. I went to training on this. It was a week course from 7 a.m. to like 5 p.m. and a ridiculous test at the end of it. And it was a very difficult test. Let's just put it that way. So how could you jam pack all of that information if it was just simply, I'm doing 500,000 in collections and I think it should sell for 80% of collections? That's just not the real world, right? So a couple of things about that. All practices are not created equal, and definitely not all practices are managed equal. So let that sink in. I know that's obvious. But again, if you're using rules of thumb, I got to say the obvious. The percentage of your top line is not a real valuation. Okay. And a couple comments about that. So think about this for a second. Now put yourself, sellers, in the buyer's chair real quick and think to yourself, okay, which one's better for me as a buyer? A $900,000 practice taking home 225, or an $800,000 practice top line taking home 360. Now, if we were in the room, I would start calling on you and saying which one's better. It's obviously the 360. It's not about the top line, it's about the bottom line. Okay, and so just to throw a percentage on 800,000, if the rule of thumb is whatever, 85% in this market. If I take 85% of 900 or 85% of 800, the practice that's doing 900, that doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. And so profitability matters, and that's what I'm going to talk a little bit about tonight, some more. But again, let's just make this even easier. The $1 million practice scenario. Practice broker once told me, Mike, if you're doing $1 million practice and it's throwing off 500 grand, does $1 million, and another practice that's doing $1 million and it's throwing off 300 grand, should they sell for the same amount? No, absolutely not. Okay, so value. So profitability is a key component. Any valuation training is going to tell you it's a prediction of future profits. It's a multiple. You're going to be valued on a multiple of your profit. And it's a prediction of what that profit is going to be in the future. That buyer is buying that practice with hopefully a reliable source of income moving forward. And sure, the practice has a ton of potential, I'm sure. And trust me, I love potential as a practice consultant. But it's not the same valuation. And I'll take this one step further. Maybe this is a bad scenario, and I'm definitely not a car guy. But think of a Honda Civic. Okay, and again, the Fast and Furious movies and all that, right? So a Honda Civic right off the lot, without automatic windows, without tricked out tires and all kinds of things, just stock. It probably retails for about $20,000 or less, actually. Base, we're talking really, really base. But you can take that Honda Civic and turn it into a Fast and Furious car, because there's a lot of aftermarket parts. There's crazy spoilers and neon lights and nitrous gas and all kinds of stuff that you can throw into a Honda Civic and retool it to make it a Fast and Furious car. So does that mean that the Honda Civic is worth more because it has the availability of all these cool parts? No, just because the potential of that car is great doesn't mean that that's what it's worth today. And I think that's really, really important, as you all sellers understand that heading into the sale of the practice is not just a percentage of top line. And it's not, oh, there's so much opportunity. It's what have I done in the last 3 years? And I know we can talk about COVID, so ask your questions. But what have I done as the seller for the last 3-4 years? And this is what you're buying, Mr. Buyer or Miss Buyer. And this is the predictability of probably what you're going to do, minus maybe 10% attrition max. So I just want that to just crystallize with you. All right. So tough to get any read on you all in the room about this time that I'd be asking questions and really tapping into facial expressions and challenging you all. So bear with it. And by the way, we're going to get out. We're going to get out maybe a little bit early tonight, but assuming the questions, if you guys have all questions. So, all right. So Remember the Michael Jordan effect that I talked about tonight. So Michael Jordan sold on top. And so I want you to think about that, right? Because if you're really thinking about your business as a business for sale, then maximize the opportunity. Now, depending on where you're at in your life cycle, 1 year, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, I don't know what that looks like. But you all should be thinking about my exit plan, my exit strategy, my liquidity event. If you're not thinking about that, you're missing it. Be a smarter business person and think about what is my end game. And the cool thing about dentistry is, like, for example, me, I own a consulting firm. We do pretty well. We've got lots of clients. We've got revenue. We've got a profitability just like every other business, right? My business would be really hard to sell. It would be. I would have to find another Michael Dinsio to perform at the same level I do. And even if I could find that person, well, I would have to train them, and there would be a lot of goodwill, and I have to show them the ropes and maybe knowledge dump on them, right? So luckily, you all have a really solid business that you can pass to another dentist, and you all can do about the same thing. Now, I'm not saying you're all equally the same in skill set, but what I am saying is it's very transferable. It's very predictable, okay? And the more predictability you can put into that, the better a buyer, or the more comfortable a buyer will be. Buyers, think about that. It's the opposite. If you're seeing a practice that is super erratic, the profitability is erratic, you can't put too much prediction on what you're inheriting, you got to ask more questions, because you could be walking into a landmine. We've all heard of those stories about buying a practice and it was just not what it was represented. And those are really sad stories. I was, again, a banker for many years, and unfortunately, the bank took some losses, and that just happens. And so predictability is the key. So remember that. Okay, so this is a little exercise that I would challenge you all to think about. So I call it the gap analysis. And in theory, what you're trying to do is you're trying to figure out if there is a gap, and if there is a gap, how do we solve for that gap? And it's just being intentional. Could be 1 year, 3 years, or 5 years. I don't care. If you got 5 years ahead of you, you got more time to hit your goals. If you've got a 1 year time frame, you got to get at it, and you got to hit it ground running, or maybe potentially push it out another year. But the gap, okay, so get a valuation. I can do an evaluation. Any practice broker can. Brian Bray can. We're all qualified to give you a decent number, with the understanding that practices sell for about this, and we collect all the information. We try to understand all of your financials. Try to put some predictability to it. We look at the market, and if you're buying in the middle of Washington, where no one wants to live, well, obviously that's going to be lower value. If you're trying to get somewhere in Kirkland, where everybody wants to be right now, or Bellevue, the valuation goes high. Whether it just depends on all of these different variations. So we can get into some more valuation tonight, but I won't stay there too long tonight. If you've got some technical questions, we can get into it. So, but step one is just simply, no matter if you're 1 year, 3 years, 5 years, get a valuation, get a baseline, right? Just try to get an idea, and don't do a percentage of, because if you go through the process and you actually understand valuation, then you're going to understand what moves the needle, right? Or what things you need to work on. Okay, so just get a baseline. The next obvious step is a financial plan. And why that's important, I'm definitely not an FA, so I'm not going to give you any financial advice tonight. But the financial plan matters, because if you're like a lot of my clients, or like a lot of my clients were when I was a banker, they used their practice as their vehicle for retirement. And that's a dangerous thing. And if that's the case, okay, if that's the case and that's what you're doing, then what we're going over is so important, because so many of you have dumped into the practice all the money that they've made, or a big chunk of the money made, and that's their golden goose. And if that's the case, you're at risk, and you need to really pay attention tonight. If you've done the right things with your money over the last, whatever, 20 years, this is still important, because again, Michael Jordan sold on top. Be a good business owner, be intentional about this process so you can maximize your opportunity. But just be intentional. So when you get a financial plan and you know how much you need to retire, and then you get a valuation for your practice, and remember, you got to factor in taxes. Thanks to the last two presidents, let's stay away from politics, but just taxes is a challenge this year for selling your practice. And understand what that is. Talk to Kevin and Brian about what's that look like. What's the capital gains tax, which just increased. But there's some technicalities there. So again, just understand, if I sold my practice today, minus taxes, minus any fees of any professionals, practice broker, attorneys, consultants, you name it, all the fees, and then that is the amount you're going to get. How does that fit into your financial plan? Okay. If it fits your financial plan perfectly, great, fine. But if it doesn't, and there's a gap, a difference of, crap, I need an extra 250. I need an extra 100. I need an extra 500,000. It's a lot bigger, right? But again, based on your timeline, 5 years, waterfall where you're trying to get at. So that gives you, those first 3 steps are key, and it might cost you some money, but what you focus on is what happens. And too many times do we react to what we're trying to achieve in our lives. This is one place that, you should be intentional and really calculate, paper and pencil, maybe invest in it, and figure out where you want to be. So there's a decision point on step 3. Do I have plenty of money or don't I? What do? Do we got to grow the practice by a specific amount so that we can sell our practice for more? Or do we want to, are we good with exactly it and we need to just maintain? That's fine too. But again, understanding these numbers is super, super key. Okay. Step 4, you obviously have to strategize, and you have to declare a goal, and you have to make that goal real. Now, what kind of consultant would I be if I didn't talk about goals? So goals, of course, have to be smart goals. If you've heard of this before, bear with me. If you've never, take a picture, write this down. A SMART goal is specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-based, time-bound, some people say. It has to fit all of that. It can't be specific, measurable, but not attainable. It has to be, it can't, if you leave one of these out, it's very problematic. So get very, very granular with this. I think a lot of my job as a dental consultant, my team's job, is to make things attainable and put in systems for measure and be very specific. Of course, it's relevant. And then create a time-based or time-bound. By when do we want to achieve this? And what specifically are we trying to fix? And what systems are we going to hold ourselves to measure it? And is it even attainable? Should we stretch it? Should we back down? So it has to be really, really smart. Otherwise, you're just going to be very frustrated with it. So calculate the gap, strategize, declare the goal, and get smart with it. Now, I take everything back to your why. And if some of you, I got a book around here, it's called Find Your Why. I'm looking at it. I should have had it, by Simon Sinek. For those of you who don't know Simon Sinek or don't know Find Your Why, do that. That's a gift from me to you, 2022. You have to Google it and listen to Simon, because everything we do, we have to believe in what we're doing. And if you don't believe anymore and you don't know why we do what we do, why you get up out of bed every single day, if you don't believe it and you don't know your why, how are you going to communicate to your patients, to your team, of why we do what we do? There's so many practices that Next Level walks into, and we've got team members that know their why. The owner of the practice doesn't know their why. They're just there for money, or at least it feels that way. And so eventually the team picks up on that, and it's just a job. And so I make the why important, because you have to take it to that place. And if there is a gap in your retirement plan, what's that mean if you don't close that gap? What's your why behind it? Do you want to be super stressed financially once you're in retirement? Do you want to work forever and work forever and forever? And so your why might be to share time with family, and what that costs you. You know, there's a lot of spouses I hear that want you all to retire if you're at that age, that twilight age. And that why, if that why is not strong enough, then this is just kind of a fun consulting exercise. It's all great, learn some things today. But if you don't know your why behind it, and if it's just about money, it's not going to work, I promise you. But if it's about oral health, or if it's about building an incredible practice that supports the community and you can pass to the next generation, and your why is strong enough, and you work yourself through that exercise of understanding your why, then you will achieve your goals. And every single day you will have purpose behind what you're trying to do. Okay. And it just can't be about money. It can't be, but it might be you and your spouse riding off into the sunset, having enough money to enjoy the rest of your life together. So yeah, sure, that's tied to money, but the greater why is being relaxed and enjoying, our last leg on this earth, right? Not to be morbid, but it's the truth. So your why, so being very specific about what you're trying to do, and understanding your why behind why you're trying to do it. Simon Sinek, check it out. Okay, so valuation, financial plan, determine the gap. There's no gap, still declare a goal. You got years left in you got gas in the tank, declare a goal. Again, Michael Jordan, sell on top, and then find your why through that process. Okay, step 5, execute your plan. So, obviously you strategize, and now you got to execute it. And there's some key things about it. And of course, we could have a whole seminars on just this part as dental practice consultants. But some top 3 things that I would say are key to this. So get your team's buy-in. Okay, sure, that's really fluffy and obvious, but no, I mean it. Like, there's so many times that we walk into our practices and your team has no idea what your goals are, or why your goals are what they are. And if it's just about money, again, it's not going to work. People know what fake is. They can feel it. We all use the word, logically this makes sense, but it just doesn't feel right. Simon Sinek talks about that and find the why. So it can't be fake. So really work yourself through that. But you have to get your team's buy-in, because everything that we do in a dental practice, you need your team to do it all the way through. And so I've got some strategies on how to get them to buy in, but that's for another day. The other thing I want to remind you is small, actionable goals. We're going to talk about some takeaways tonight and things that you can work on. But I will tell you, we work with a lot of our clients and we say, hey, like, what are we working on next week? Okay, what do we want to accomplish? It could be as small as, I want to fill out my target board for the first time this week. Mike and Paula, you guys trained us on how to do that. Haven't implemented that yet. I'm going to work on that this week, right? Could be, I'm going to focus on treatment acceptance this week. This week, I'm going to focus on, I'm going to do this. I'm going to use that intraoral camera. It's been sitting there collecting dust. Or I'm going to scan more people this week with my my really excellent radiography and try to diagnose more, or whatever. Very specific goals, because in 1 week's period of time, it might be the simplest implementation, but you literally get 52 of those wins. And 52 wins adds up to a massive win. And so you have to bring things down to very, very small action items. There's another book I want you all to write down, and it's called The One Thing by Gary Keller. We train on this, is the one thing. What's the one thing today that's going to move the needle? And we talk about multitasking. Multitasking is actually a computer thing. If you look at back in the day where that name came from, it's called multitasking. Computers can multitask. They're computers, right? And they have CPUs, but even CPUs can get overloaded and it starts wearing down the performance. And when you wear down the performance, then certain things don't get done as good or as effectively as it could. So we do a lot of multitasking in dental, and shocked. I was shocked about this. I'll share this. Someone that was out of the business of dentistry, but did a lot of banking and financials, and Matt can relate, is I didn't understand the units in a dental office until I became in it with you all on a daily basis. And although I'm still the business coach, Paula and Stefani, my teammates, are in your practice and working with the little systems. I guess what I didn't realize, coming from a banker or financial guy's view, is how your every day is a 15-minute type increment. If 15 minutes gets off, your entire schedule's off. Or maybe you didn't have time to do that filling, or whatever the case may be, or maybe we didn't do the pictures that could have sold that patient's, get that patient's head right about accepting treatment. I mean, it's literally 15 minutes, 15 minutes, right? And it's amazing how you all live on that clock. And what I'm telling you is, if you're not very specific about the one thing you're trying to accomplish today, it is so easy in your world to walk in, grind every 15 minutes until 8 hours later, you're, what the hell just happened? My day's over. I really wanted to accomplish that one thing, and it just gets pushed back. I'm exhausted. Now I got to do my bookkeeping, or I got to do some business stuff, and it just falls away. And so the book, The One Thing, is another gift. 2022, put it on your list. Audible, I don't care, but it's really good. You can't multitask. Us humans cannot. You can't effectively do it. I promise you can't. So by being super clear about what you're trying to execute and having the small wins, they add up to just major results. Nice, fun little story about something they talk about in the book is, if you line up a domino, and I might butcher this, it's been a while, I need to read it again. You line up a domino, but you make the next domino, I think it's 50% bigger, and then the next domino 50% bigger, and the next one 50% bigger. So all you're doing is you're increasing it by 50%. By I forget the exact numbers, but it's a very small amount that you're the size of the Empire State Building. A very small amount, you're hitting Mount Everest. A very small amount, like literally less than 1,000, you're hitting the moon or something crazy like that. And so I just tell you that, like, the inertia of each domino could knock over the next domino. And pretty soon you're knocking over the domino that's greater than the moon. The point is this stuff really does add up. And so, sorry, executing the plan, I can talk just about step 5, but get your team's buy-in, come up with small actionable goals, and live by it. Write it up, put it on your forehead, whatever you have to do to focus on what that one thing is that's going to move the needle, do it. And then the most important thing is celebrate wins and share your success. I'm shocked by the lack of transparency that our clients don't manage to. Share the numbers, share the wins, explain why it matters, and you will see and experience greater success. I promise you. We just did annual planning last month ago, and we shared the goal, and we had them declare it. And they were so appreciative. It was a practice in Wenatchee. They're so appreciative that management, the consultants, the owners, and the office manager were willing to share the numbers with them. And I'm just like, wow, like they wanted to know. And so I was just really blown away by the impact that made them feel. So don't be afraid to share numbers. It's not like you're telling them how much money you made. Just share the numbers, come up with a goal. Okay, I could go on and on about step 5, of course. Step 6, obviously, list the practice, sell the practice, and that's what it's all about, right? And that's a 1-year, 3-year, 5-year plan. But that's what it all came up to, and that is the liquidity event. Again, I want to remind you to factor in the taxes, factor in the fees, but factor all that in on the front end of step 1 through 3. Factor that all in and have the professionals get you to the end, the finish line. You can afford all of the taxes and all of the fees if you're planning. But what happens is everybody gets really upset that there's fees and taxes because they didn't do step 1 through 3, 4, 5 years before they sold. If it's all planned, it's no problem. It's no problem. And growing your practice by $100,000 each year is not that big of a deal. Pretty soon you're at a $500,000 in 5 years. So again, little things. So factor in taxes and fees, be super realistic. You'll be shocked about how fast some practices move and how slow other practices sit. I'm not a practice broker, but I have a lot of friends in the rest of the country, not just here locally, that we all think that, oh my gosh, look at this golden goose of a practice. Doesn't move. 3, 4, 6 months later, you think you're going to get 12 offers on it, and you don't. It's the hardest job of a practice broker. And all of you probably think, gosh, my practice is so sellable. My friends sold their practice. They had offers in 2 days. It sold, no problem, easy. Your practice might not be that fast. So be realistic, talk to the professionals, stay level-headed. This is buyer and seller. Buyer and seller. Be realistic, have a level head about the process, that there is going to be give and take. This is somebody's livelihood, that their blood, sweat, and tears and passion had gone into this baby that they have nurtured for 20 years. Don't come in guns a-blazing and insult them with why they're not doing Invisalign or why they don't have the appropriate x-ray, or their system's inadequate, or why don't you have this? Like, don't insult. Like, this is their life that they're selling, they want to transition to. On the other side, sellers, please understand that your younger doctors that just graduated, they are placing implants in college. This is what they do. This is part of their training. They're placing implants. They need a CBCT scan to technically do that by standard of care. Listen to me, I'm not even a dentist. I don't want to tell you all, but my point is it's a different mindset. And so they're in the mode of, how am I going to be a great business owner? How am I going to keep up with the Joneses? How am I going to maximize insurance but still give quality of care? They're thinking about all that stuff. So be level-headed on both sides, because I'm telling you, I have seen the silliest things fall apart over $5,000 on millions of dollar checks closing, and they just weren't level-headed. They just weren't. Okay, so be patient, rely on your professionals and ask them and make sure that things are the right way and should, whatever. But that's where the professionals really do come into play, is keeping everybody super level-headed, especially me as a buyer's rep, because that's a new concept. And so don't be scared if you hear of someone like me that's a buyer's rep helping the buyer. It just keeps everybody level-headed. It's not crazy to think that there's a seller rep and a buyer rep for a house. Why would it be any different for practices? So don't be worried about that. We will all guide everybody through the process smoothly, the most confidence, with the most education, and get the job done, bottom line. And then last steps, get some hobbies. I mean, a lot of sellers struggle with this idea of just not being a quote unquote dentist anymore. And so what's your plan? Don't just sell your practice and be like, oh, now what do I do? Because it's super depressing and it's hard for people to transition. I oftentimes get questions. I'm only seeing 4 things in the chat right now. Get it out there. Actually, I don't see any questions. So you either falling asleep or you have no questions, but it's hard for me to believe. So people, get your questions in. Usually I charge for advice, so I'm happy to share it to you for free tonight. But working back, what's that scenario look like? You know, selling to someone and then continuing to work. That's really hard on a buyer, and I can explain why. But buyers understand sellers just might not want to walk away yet, and they have a lot of good nuggets, some really good nuggets to pass on to you. But cash flow is challenging in scenarios like that. So so that's that. Step 6 is obviously take that money that you have earned and put it to work. Execute that financial plan that we talked about in step 2. Okay, and that's the 7 steps to a solid transition plan. I challenge you to be intentional tonight. I challenge you to be intentional with this whole process. Okay, so what can you do to keep this to get your practice prepped and get it ready? So please ask questions about this, but for goodness sakes, clean up your books. Yes, you might have to pay a few more taxes to Uncle Sam in 2022 or 2023. But I just explained to you that buyers and myself as professionals, even CPAs, if I'm not involved, Kevin and Brian that are representing buyers, if you're cooking the books, and I'm not saying cooking, it's a terrible word of saying, but if you're being really creative with the expenses that you run through your practice, how in the world am I supposed to, or a CPA supposed to know how much profit your business is really throwing off? How am I supposed to know that? So of course I'm going to devalue your business. So be super clean about profitability and know, and if you do run things through, I've seen it all, ex-banker, Amazon accounts, vacations, dinners, jets, and apparently in Alaska, it's really popular to own planes. I've seen it all. Matt knows. Planes. Dentists own planes, and I had one person, one doctor tell me that they had to have the plane because they lived so many miles and they flew into work every day, and that was just a normal expense. So the point is know your personal expenses and call it out if you did do it. Nobody in this entire process is the FBI or the tax police. Nobody. But if you called that out and said, oh, we run the family's Amazon account through office expenses, tell me, because that is going to be the buyer's benefit. That's income that they get. So call that out. Call out one-time expenses. So if you bought like a brand new computer system to get HIPAA compliant, which is the 4th one down, that's going to be a pretty heavy investment that the buyer is not going to have to take on. So that's a plus. And that's going to lower your profitability that year, but I'm not going to dock you for that. I'm going to add that expense back in because that's not something that the new owner is going to have every year. So if you invested $20,000 into a new piece of equipment, yes, you did. Good job. It shows lower profitability to the IRS, but for the buyer, that's not something that they're going to have to invest in when they're the buyer. So I'm going to add that back as income. We could talk more about that. Secure your key team members in your office. I told you, the scariest thing about transitions is team. Sometimes people give bonuses. Sometimes people do all kinds of contracts. There's lots of things that you can do to secure the team. You might not want to tell them, of course. There's horror stories about telling your team. We talk about that for sure. But somehow secure the team. And by the way, waiting for the buyer to give them a raise is not a cool move because the buyer has a loan that they have to pay, Matt. You don't have a loan, hopefully. And so if am shocked usually at being when my clients buy a practice and day one, the hygienist walks up and says, I need a raise. And I'm like, well, what happened to the doctor that you've been working for 20 years? Why didn't you ask him for a raise? You're hitting the buyer up for this. So think about those things. If you're being fair to the next owner, think about those things. Key team members, HIPAA compliant is challenging. Computer systems, you need Windows 10 to be that. Quickly moving through, and I see some questions. Thank you. Questions, yay. I want to just hear my voice. Oh, Isabel, you want to facilitate some? Yeah.
Yeah, I can read them to you.
Okay.
So one of the first questions was, any thoughts on a specialist practice with 2 offices and deciding to split the offices up and sell them separately? Understanding, of course, it's more complicated, but your thoughts on the financial advantage versus selling the practice as a whole?
Yeah, so splitting it up is fine and hasn't been an issue in the past. If they're too close, you got to worry about the referral sources. So if they're really close, a buyer is going to have some major concerns about the sustainability of that business. And that goes for GPs as well. But owning 2 practices and patients following you. But big picture, especially the referral sources, they want to make sure that they are locking in those referral sources, your referral sources. And so the more stability that you can provide both buyers by splitting it up, hey, this practice, you got these people, and this practice, you got these people. But I have gone through some transitions where that was not done appropriately, and the seller, it was a mess. Let's just put it that way. So having a game plan for what the buyer needs to do and should do, and laying that out for that buyer and how you're going to secure that is key. I would say that particular case, and I'll end with this, is it's tough for me to answer that without understanding the details of it. But if the practices are too close, I would consider bundling them. If the practices aren't, and you can easily carve it and say this, maybe pull a referral source list and show the buyer that, hey, these referrals don't send to this and these referrals don't send to this. I hope I answered that question, Isabel.
Yeah, well, I'll keep an eye on the chat and see if he has any more to that question. And then we did have one question from an anonymous attendee who says, who typically buys the buyer's rep fee? Or who typically pays the buyer's rep fee? And is it usually a percentage of the sale price?
Good question. So again, new philosophy, new concept, but typically the buyer pays a flat fee to a buyer's rep, and it's absolutely not a percentage of. Maybe I should think about that, but it's not the first time I got that question. So it's a flat fee, and the buyers pay for that. For the buyers in the room, a buyer rep should be available to you, looking at all of the prospectuses that you send them. Buyers, you're going to be looking at multiple practices, and you're not sure which one to buy, right? And so the buyer rep fee shouldn't be in perpetuity and just monthly. It should be a flat fee, and you lay out the outline for what your service is, and the bank usually will help you pay for that fee at the close. So no, the seller doesn't pay it, and it's a flat fee, usually not a percentage. But that's just me. I can't speak for everybody out there.
Okay,
good question,
thank you, Michael. And I did see one more hand up, and but I haven't seen anything in the chat box yet. So I'll let you know if we get any more questions.
Perfect. We're getting close to the end, folks. So get them in. I promise I'm going to wrap this up clean, but to the sellers and getting prepared, reduce accounts receivables. If you're planning on selling your receivables, clean them up. There's services out there. Our front office gal does it. Front office coach, she does it. Cleaning up your accounts receivables is key. There's a lot of third-party billers that can help you with this kind of stuff. But when a buyer is looking to buy your accounts receivables, they want to see that it's healthy. And what's healthy? 1 month's worth of collections is a standard role. So to make things easy, if I'm doing 1.2 million in collections a year, I would want your total accounts receivables to be 100,000 or less. 1.2 divided by 12 equals 100,000. Simple math. So think of whatever you did last year, divide it by 12, and then pull an accounts receivables report and look at the total. And I'm talking insurance and patient portion total should be 1 month's worth. And if it's not clean, or if you're seeing a lot of receivables in the plus 90, it's a tough thing for a buyer. I wouldn't buy that. There's a good chance you're not going to collect that. So, and trust me, buyers and sellers, actually, I'm going to get passionate about this. Buyers and sellers, it's best practices for you buyers to buy the accounts receivables. I convinced a doctor today not to buy, but if I had it my way, buy the accounts receivables, because who wants to track all of that? And a fun little statistic for all of you is the number one reason to go to court in a transition is over the receivables. So if you can eliminate that risk by buying and taking the responsibility of it, you're going to set yourself up for more success. But why would a buyer want to buy a very non-managed accounts receivables? Lots to talk about there. Clear up credit balances. Guys, refund people, because that's going to bite you. Sellers, it's going to bite you. Pull a credit balance report and start working on it. Start sending those refunds back out, or even better, get those patients in to get them to accept more of their treatment plan with those credits. But you owe that money, clean it up. Increase fees. Who better to be able to increase fees? If you haven't touched your fees in more than 5 years or more, or less, or more, you need to increase them. The buyer's going to take it on. They're going to have to increase them. Who better to increase them? You or them? You. Absolutely. You've got the goodwill. The patients will understand, as long as it's incremental. The team will back you. A buyer comes in and says, we're increasing the fees. All of a sudden, they're the jerk. But really, your fees are not appropriate. So let me get through these last 2 points, then we can answer these questions. Review the lease. This is so important, you guys. Leases kills deals. If your lease is not in order, you will have a hard time selling your practice. Period. End of story. Get your lease reviewed. If it's been a while, send it to your attorney. Again, contact professionals. But there are things in your lease that probably need to be addressed, because if buyer can't secure a good lease, why would they pay you thousands and hundreds of thousands of dollars knowing that they could get kicked out at any time, or if the rate's going to go up dramatically? Think about that. That's a game changer. I'm sitting here valuing your profitability, but it's going to change in a year. I mean, again, stability is the key. You have to create as much stability. So review your lease and get that in order. And we already talked about production goals, so I won't bore you there. Let's answer that next question, Isabel.
All right, so we have two. So the first one is, what are your thoughts on dropping insurances 1, 2, 3, or 5 years ahead of your desired practice sale? Understanding that historical cash flow is important for evaluation either way, but are there current trends in buyers being more or less attracted to practices with a certain amount of insurance versus FFS patients?
Love that question. Love that question. So thank you for asking it. Whoever that was, there's strategies around this. So if I was a practice consultant and someone wanted to do this, I would totally endorse them. My team would have to be amazing at verbal skills, because at the end of the day, folks, if you and your team are great at communicating to the patients, you can pull this off. But if you all have hard times handing off a perio maintenance treatment plan and they're not accepting it, don't even consider doing this. So it ends up being a communication thing. But think about it, folks. If I'm a patient and I've been going to you for the last 5 years, and over the last 5 years, you dropped my insurance, but I love you, doc, and I trust you, and I've done a root canal and a crown. It's been amazing. And I just love your office, and I love your team, and I trust all of you, and you're dropping my insurance. And so I'm going to make the decision to go ahead and pay you a little bit more. A little bit more is the key, or maybe a lot of it more, but depends on what your fee schedule, your cash fee schedule is. Okay, that's all good and well, but then a buyer comes in. Do they have the same goodwill that you do? The answer is no, but the team does. And so I think I get this question a lot, that I think buyers are really attracted to the idea of no insurance. Who wouldn't be? Who wouldn't be? And by the way, those practices are much more profitable usually. Your patient flow goes down quickly when you're, again, the strategy of dropping insurances. And I think there can be a strategy, by the way, side pocket. I could talk about this for hours, but there could be a strategy of weaning off the lower ones. I know Primera, I think it was, or Cigna. Primera, shoot. I just heard this today, that they just dropped. You guys are faced with this decision. And so you can make that decision. Just make sure that your team is prepared for the conversations. And by the way, you could time it. You could say, hey, let's pull a list of all of those patients on that insurance. And over the next 12 months, we're going to talk to them twice about what's about to happen. And then the third time they come in, it's happened. But the whole point of the transition is it can be more desirable. Yes. The answer is yes. But you have to understand that the buyer doesn't have the goodwill that you do. And so that's my first concern. And so it's a tough question to answer if it's good or bad for the buyer. I think it could be really great for the buyer. But if they aren't great chairside, just like any transition, it's all about that feeling, that presence, that communication. And if you make that transition and it's super successful, then your team is going to be able to walk that buyer through the process as well. So I wouldn't do it a year before you sell or 2 years before the sell. I would want there to be an established secure, hey, we've been doing this for 2 years. The patients have all been super loyal, and that transition plan would have to be a lot tighter, almost like a specialist, but not really. I could talk about that on and on. There are strategies about weaning off. There's concerns about buyers buying it, but it's obviously very attractive because of what you did. And I just said increase your fees, because who better to do it is you. And so if you're going to do that, who better to do it? But I will tell you, the vast majority are still very much on insurance. And yeah, that's the norm. That's the norm. So I hope I answered that question. Isabel, what's the follow-up on that, if there is one?
It doesn't look like there's a follow-up on that question, but there was a follow-up to the question earlier about splitting the practices. It says, just as a follow-up, you mentioned the referral sources. So, and it says, so in my opinion, a successful specialist practice is able to move on from relying solely on referrals from GPs and obtain the majority of the referrals from the community, word of mouth, friends, and family of former patients, etc. Any thoughts on this and making the referral source point moot?
Yeah, no, so I didn't know your specialty. Pedo, ortho, gosh, even some perio folks can go direct and have that relationship. So I didn't know your specialty, but so if it's not a referral issue in a scenario like that, then it really is location and how you're going to make the buyer feel good about patients potentially going back and forth. Now, if you sell it to independent buyers, this buyer doesn't have an agreement with this buyer, right? If you sold one of your practices to this buyer and did a deal and said, hey, for 1 or 2 years, I'll pay you if someone leaves X amount of dollars per patient, or you can kind of like figure that out if the practices are close, and then create an established business around that second office. If you're trying to do it all at the same time, I just want you to know that non-compete is going to be the biggest challenge with the current patients bouncing back and forth or following you. You sold them exactly the same time. That could work out fine. But if the buyers got wind of that, you're gone at that point. I'm assuming you're gone in this question. Then it should be fine. But just understand that there's a stickiness there, and the more stability that you can put into the buyer's purchase, the better. Sharing with them, marketing how you got new patients in. So, I've had devastating issues with team members, where one team member, the office manager runs both, and it wasn't super clear that the buyer was getting that office manager at the other office. Again, it create stability and create a transition plan and sell it as such. And the last thing that you want to do is get pulled into a lawsuit because you misrepresented. And not that that would be your intention. The fact that you're asking questions is like this is saying that you're trying to be intentional about it. But come up with a solid transition plan for both buyers and show the roadmap of how this could be successful. I think you'd be fine.
Awesome. Thank you, Michael. And I don't see,
okay.
Oh, hold on. He says, thank you very much for answering my questions.
Oh, good. Okay, good. I was grasping because I don't know everything about your situation, but great questions, because one of the red flags as a buyer's rep is really understanding the dynamics of everything. Stealing equipment has been an issue, whereas a practice owner owns multiple practices, and equipment was taken from one and put into the other, and that wasn't super clear. It has to be super clear, folks. And DSOs that sell off practices do that all the time, and it just really gets me frustrated. This is the last slide, and I know I'm running into my final leg here, folks. Bottom line. Oh no, I'm sorry. There is one more slide. The things that you can control versus the things you can't control as you put together your strategy and how you're going to grow your practice over the next 1, 3, 5 years. Don't focus on the things you can't control. You can't control insurance contracts. You can't control the environment of rising wages, the location of your practice. You have a lease. You can't move. Some people think it's their location that sucks, and that's holding them back. You can't control the federal regulations and the mandates and all that stuff. You can't control COVID-19. Don't focus on that stuff. React to it. Be a great business owner. Be adaptable. And one of my favorite quotes is in chaos is opportunity, bottom line. And those that thrive in chaos end up being more successful than the vast majority. And so controlling the things that you can. I know it's light and fluffy, patient experience, but guys, it comes back to that why. Why are you doing what you do every single day? Do your patients feel that? If they don't, what can you do so that they do feel it? And don't tell me that we greet them and we say, hello, Michael, thanks for coming to the practice today. I always get that. Guys, how do you make your patients feel special? How do you give them that hospitality? How do you do that? Oh, we greet them. We know our patients by name, their family. Come on. You don't think the other dental office literally right across the street greets your patients by first name? Come on. You got to up your game. And if you don't know your why and your team doesn't know your why, everybody round up, listen to Simon Sinek, do a book club for that month, and make everybody know why they show up every single day so that the patients know why. Because if the patients know why you do what you do, and they will trust you, they'll feel it, and they'll refer people. It's all really good stuff. So you can control that. Systems and protocol. Guys, remember I talked about the widgets, the units in your office. 15 minutes, 15 minutes, 15 minutes. The tighter your systems are, the more opportunity you get. I can't overemphasize that those that are producers in the room today are thinking, I just need another crown. I just need an all-on-4 case. I'm a producer. I can pay my bills because I know I can do what it takes to make this work. What happens with situations like that is you get sloppy with your systems. and your protocols. If you actually maximized all of the hygiene, all of the x-rays, all of the exams, the frequency increased. You asked every patient for reviews to get new patients. You tracked perio. You followed up on treatment that walked out the door. You had financial arrangements and actually presented that and owned that. Like, the little things get lost. And I just told you that the littlest things add up to massive things. And the practices that we help that have grown 30 or more plus is because they were serious about their systems. They were serious about their systems, because if their systems and protocols are tight and you're really good at quote unquote selling dentistry, you're going to see more people to sell dentistry because they're in your practice more. And for the specialists in the room, sorry, I'm talking a lot about GPs tonight, but you guys have systems too. And that might be systems around referral sources or marketing or just doing the things that you need to do to bring in the new patients. A whole nother conversation, but systems and protocols, maximizing every 15 minutes. I'll skip over culture, hit that one hard. New patient flow. Guys, referrals and reviews are cheap and easy. You just have to ask. That's the truth. For some reason, people don't like to brag in our industry. And you got to brag in this world. You have to say how great we are. You know, hey, we're great. Please share that, because without your review on Google, other patients that haven't experienced our practice don't know what it's like here. So it's not about us. It's about sharing the experience with other people so that they feel safe and comfortable. Maybe they're high anxiety, maybe whatever the case may be, but that might give them the confidence to come to our practice. Why not have that conversation with someone that said, God, I love you guys. You love us? That's a perfect opportunity to say, will you please share that? So it's just an initiative. Follow-ups, I already talked about that. You can control follow-ups. All of you think that your treatment acceptance is 60%. I promise you it's not. I track it. The average is closer to 40%. So, and that's by dollar, not by like patient, 10 patients, 6 of them accept, that would be 60%. No, I'm talking 10 patients, you diagnose 100,000, 40,000 gets accepted, talking dollar amounts. You can control your case presentation. If you feel like you're lacking, jump into it, make some changes. Fee schedule, talked a lot about. The perio program, my gosh. Everybody wants to talk about how their hygienist is at $60 an hour and that they're killing us. And in a lot of ways, they are hurting the industry. There's no secret about that. But a hygienist pencils 2 ways. Number one, are they diagnosing perio? And are they good at that? And do they believe in it? And do they have a why behind it? And do you even have a perio program or protocol developed so that all your hygienists in the whole office have a protocol that says, when we see this, you're just defining what your practice believes in. And just by doing that, the expectation is to talk about it with the patients. Adjunctive services, sealants, Arrestin, all kinds of fun stuff that the hygienist can do to increase production. You guys, they can do this. They can, but it's all about their why. If they don't believe in what they're doing, then it is going to be a little bit more challenging, of course. But you can get a hygienist to ROI. Oh, I said 2 things. So increasing production is one thing, but also getting more frequent with the hygiene department. It gives you the opportunity to diagnose more treatment. I know that's obvious, but you guys, I just said every single practice has slippage. Is spilt milk, as I say. Once you spill the milk, you can't get it 100% back into that glass. You can wring it out, but you can't get it 100% back in. And so, so tighten that up so you have less slippage. Last slide, I will leave you with this. I want you to literally take a picture with your phone, and I want you to ask yourself and be real about this stuff. No gut feelings. No gut feelings. I said in here, case acceptance last month, how much was presented, how much was accepted. I'm 60%. No, I want you to literally look it up or track it this month and tell me what it was. And then ask yourself, could it be better? Perio acceptance last month. Do you know how many new patients you got? Okay, you know the number, but where did they come from? Where did they come from? And should you do more of that marketing? Maybe. How many patients went inactive? Oh, my favorite. Okay, so we're all bragging about how we get 50 new patients a month. How many walked out the back door and never got reappointed? And they fell into the no zone of 18 months, sorry. An active patient has been in your practice the last 18 months, and you can't blame COVID anymore, folks, because we're beyond that 18-month mark, I think. Yeah. So, so many people need recalled back into your practice that were afraid of COVID and just haven't gotten the call. It's not been top of mind. Get on it. How many patients this month went inactive? You should know that number before you know how many new patients you got. That's a more important number. Daily huddles and goals. And did you discuss it in morning huddles? Folks, don't get me going. I'm going to end with this. A morning huddle is not to talk about what procedures are on your schedule. A morning huddle can be 15 minutes, if that, 5 minutes even. You all have to talk about the opportunities of today. And if you don't even have daily production goals, how do you even have a meeting about what we could do to get it up $500 to hit our goal? Oh, Jimbo's coming in this week. We've talked about his night guard 6 times. Let's all concertedly focus on getting Jimbo his night guard. Oh, Mike Dinsio was really interested in Invisalign. Let's spend a little extra time locking that down. Oh, we had a cancellation today because cancellations are running rampant these days. We've got some time. Do we have any opportunities for same day treatment? Let's look at the schedule. You guys, there's opportunity every single day to be proactive about production. And if you don't even have a daily production goal and you don't have a morning huddle, what do you think's going to happen? You're not being intentional. And I say this, folks, all of these things, let's go back to what the theme of tonight was. And the last thing I'm going to end is the theme of the night was how to grow your practice to sell. And I don't care if you're 1 year out and you're exhausted. If you don't go through steps 1, 2, and 3 and know your number or your gap, and we need to talk about how to grow your practice by maybe 100,000 so that you could sell it for an additional 50 or an additional 75 grand. These are the littlest things that you can do. So anyways, all kinds of contact information here. I'm starting a second season on my podcast called Acquisition Uncensored. I think all of you could benefit from it. We just finished season 1 called Startup Uncensored. So if you go to dentaluncensored.com, you could listen to those episodes. I would love for you to schedule a call if you had any follow-up questions about tonight. And I really enjoyed being a part of this program. I love this community up in the North End. You guys are my people. I'm from Ohio, in the Appalachian Valley, and so I just love the demographics of the North End. I would love to work more up there, and just big picture. We love what we do. We're super passionate about what we do, and honestly, folks, we're here to be resources. And if any of this discussion tonight sparked interest or questions, guys, I'm not going to send you a bill. Just ask. I'm not scary. Ask. We're here to help. And I guess that's it. Reach out. Don't be shy. So thanks again for having me.
Great. Thanks, Michael. We appreciate that so much. Thanks, everybody, for attending. And I guess we'll see everybody in person next month. Take care. Be safe, everyone.